You're listening to the Two Sleuth Podcast, all about the business of dentistry, hosted by yours truly, Greg Essenmacher, a fixed full arch dental expert and founder of G&A Consult, speaking with industry leaders on the dental landscape from their perspective. At G&A, we specialize in transforming full arch dental practices, teaching, coaching, and training teams to deliver an exceptional patient experience, from that first call to delivering final smiles. Whether you're a practice owner, a DSO executive, or a regional leader looking to expand your full arch program, boost same-store sales, or unlock the true profitability of full arch cases, we've got you covered. Ready to see how full arch can elevate your practice? Visit the show page or book a discovery call today. Let's turn your potential into results. Welcome back, everyone. Greg Essenmacher here, but you know me, and if you don't, first-time listeners, thanks so much. Like, share, enjoy, or don't. Just sit back and, throw stones and blow me up on socials. I'm okay with that too. My guest today is Joseph Michelli, and rather than me going through a big, long bio, let's just say the man knows how to write books, he knows how to speak to people, and he's worked his way into dental. He actually works with dentists. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's not an outsider coming in, but an insider coming out. Welcome to the program. Thanks so much for being here today, Joseph.
I just don't want the stones thrown at me. It is to Greg's side of the screen they should be throwing the stones for sure.
Well, it all depends on what you say. They like to throw. They like to throw.
All right, I'm ready. Okay, I'm bucking it up. Here we go.
So I'm telling you, #1 hits on the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, USA Today bestseller list. Talk to me a little bit about what you've written about, what you're all about. That's what my listening audience wants to jump out of the gate with today.
Oh, yeah. So my mommy and daddy told me once upon a time that we're not put on this world to be served, but to serve others, and that we're going to only create value for others and therein as our values. So somehow that message got stuck in my gut. And throughout college and graduate school and coming out with a PhD in organizational development, I really got focused on how do we create better experiences in service to one another, no matter what we're doing, whether it's dentistry or we're doing dry cleaning at Poughkeepsie, right? It's got to be something that creates a fundamental experiential value. So with that, I got going and working with a little fish market in Seattle, Washington, a guy by the name of Johnny Okayama. He was floundering, excuse the pun, there's where the rocks come. And then, but truly
Ducking.
that little fish market was really in some trouble, and they decided they would create an experiential offering where they throw fish. If you go to the Pike Fish Market in Seattle, Washington, you'll see that happening robustly, and they turned their business around with that experiential focus, no added cost. And from there, I wrote a book with Johnny, the founder of that fish market, principal founder. And then I start working with a little guy from down the street a piece, where the first Starbucks store opened just about a block and a half away from Johnny's place. And we consulted with them for a number of years, wrote a book about them, led to second books about them, and many other companies along the way.
And what you're talking about, being of service to others, it doesn't have to be on the scale, right, that you talk about. Because I've been there. If you've been to the fish throwing place, my husband's from that part of the world, that part of the country up in the Pacific Northwest. I've been to that original Starbucks, and your impact on the world. I like to talk about the rock in the pond and the ripple effect that happens. Each of us in our own life, in our own world, have that impact every day, especially those of you listening, which is the vast listening audience, whether you're in the manufacturing side or in a clinic, you have that impact every single day with every experience you have, whether it's in work or even just in the grocery store or in your everyday life. And so talk to me a little bit about that impact we have every single day from your life experience, because that's really what starts to resonate, I think, with people.
Yeah, well, I'll stay with the fish market for just a moment if I can.
Please.
I mean, if you think about it, unfortunately, some things that we do in life, the experiences we have aren't necessarily gauged to be pleasant. I mean, healthcare in general, dentistry at times, it's the remediation of pain, it's the promotion of wellness. It's not like I go there to have pleasure, right? Like, unlike a Ritz-Carlton, which I've written about. The Pike Place Fish Market had some similarities in that people didn't want to touch dead, cold, slimy fish. They were basically selling a fish morgue, if you get right down to it. So how could we envelop that unpleasant experience, if you will, around something more playful, more joyful, so that the product, which was really quality, I mean, the outcome, the clinical outcome, if you want to contrast it to the dental space, the fish were Copper River, line caught salmon. These were real high quality fish. But in order to get through whatever the barrier of enjoyment of the product, we needed to envelop it in an experience that elevated the overall encounter. And I think that it doesn't take a lot. in the world today to do just the little things that cause somebody to go, wow, that's more than I expected, or wow, they were nicer than I figured, or geez, they were more grateful than most folks are for my business. And in that is where I think our impact in creating human experiences where we imbue humanity around whatever we do, whether that's a service business like I have and most of the dentists have, or if it's a product business like the manufacturing components of your audience.
And I think what you touch on there, because I want to talk about what you shared in the beginning there, because most that come into the dentist, whether it's for an emergency or if they're coming in for a cosmetic procedure or for, the all on X lane, which is what we teach, coach, and train at G&A Consult and help practices to be more competitive and do it more profitably. If you're talking about the outcome, that's a little different. But patient experience, right? The experience that you work with at the market, right? The fish market that most people at least can envision. They've seen pictures of it, videos, if they haven't visited that place in particular. Patient experience, right, drives case acceptance. I speak about this all the time. And all of that is driven by team development. And
Absolutely.
ultimately, it's influenced by the owner, founder, or the C-suite. And that is what's so critically important. And that's where the ownership stake comes in. Do you find that with those that you're working with that are leading and I don't want to say driving the teams, but still driving the teams, but doing it from the front and showing and modeling that behavior?
I'm gonna sound like a one-horse pony. I keep talking about fish market, but Johnny used to say that fish stink from the head, which I think is relevant in the sense that if it's not happening at the leadership level, it's not probably happening inside the building. If it's not happening inside the building, it's not being communicated to those who walk into the building. So for me, there is no doubt you are spot on in terms of the value proposition. It starts with us leading and creating value for the people inside so that they know how to use their mastery, autonomy, and purpose to extend it out and create these really extraordinary experiences. I'll go back to even creating the vision of what the outcome looks like is an experience. And there are some people who really, they romance that in a way that helps the person feel safe, at peace, hopeful, joyful, knowing that there may be pain between where they are now and the future state, but they can feel it so palpably by the way that experience of presenting the outcome goes that they're willing to at least be predisposed to go through the other parts that may be less pleasant. But even then, they kind of trust that if you can paint that picture of an outcome, maybe you can paint an experience throughout the journey that softens some of the negative elements.
Yeah, absolutely. And people describe it as, talk about the sizzle and not the steak, or sell the vacation and not that we at G&A Consult talk about it's not the what that they come in for, the product, right? The prosthesis, the denture, the fixed denture. It's the why, it's the motivation behind it. And I think that's so critically to touch on. And thank you for bringing that forward. Now, you've mentioned the fish market, you've mentioned Starbucks. I know you've worked with other brands as well. If I remember from my, my reconnaissance on you, like Mercedes-Benz and One
Yeah.
Medical. Do I have this right with some of the
Yeah.
other brands
Oh,
as
yeah,
well?
yeah.
I'd love to be able to hit on some of these as well, because I want to talk about all of the experience that you have in a limited amount of time. So we're just going to like rapid fire at all of them and some of the knowledge, the breadth of knowledge and experience that you can bring to my listening audience, because I want them to be able to tap into all of these and bring them forward and then be interested in learning more. That's really what we do here on the Two Stooth podcast for guests like you that have such a breadth of knowledge.
Well, I think that's the beauty of your podcast, right? I mean, it's one thing to have insiders who have super intimate knowledge and insights, and those are critical. And so you bring that to the table, but you also want to benchmark against industries outside of your space, so you're not just smelling the vapor trails of the jet in front of you, right? So
The
figuring
echo
out how to
chamber,
do
if you
that,
will.
exactly. So if you look at my goal in my life, it was to not just get into one lane and stay in one lane, but to learn across these different businesses and share them with each other to find the commonalities of experience creation. So if you look in the healthcare space, which was where I started my career as a clinical psychologist and working in healthcare and really helping hospitals elevate the patient experience. I've written in that space. So I've worked with UCLA Health Systems as they went on a journey of their external patient metric, the HCAHPS, that is related to value-based purchasing in traditional medical environments. How they elevated that from the lower quartile to the 99th percentile, right? So what was their journey of elevating the patient experience? And so wrote about that after working with the CEO and chief operating officer over at UCLA. And then because people move in their careers, that chief operating officer went to be the CEO at Stanford, went on ultimately to be one of the fundamental leaders at a company called One Medical, which Amazon bought for $4 billion a few years back. And I worked with him then, Amir Rubin, when he went from Stanford and other haunts to One Medical. And we were really looking at revolutionizing the patient experience. And I think the relevance to your audience is that there are a lot of things that are done in our professional practices that have been done because that's the way it's always been done. It's because we were trained to do it that way. And so this particular company is one where the founder, Tom Lee, a physician trained in primary care medicine at Harvard, went on to Stanford Business School, got his MBA at Stanford, and in the whole process was asking, what else can we do to change this industry? And he started with product, which really shows that you can do it either on the service side or the product side. On product, he developed an app called Hippocrates, which was the first on the BlackBerry, kind of dates us right there, the first of its kind app to take what was the physician's desk reference, the PDR, that big blue book with drug interactions, and instead of having a static published, document that was outdated quite often by the time it was published, he translated that into a digital offering. That's his product focus. But that wasn't enough. He said, the whole system's broken. The way people schedule appointments, the way they're treated in the waiting room, everything's broken. So he just kept asking why. Why must people only make appointments on when staff is around at a clinic? Why must they sit in a waiting room and wait when they have an appointment? Why must they have to go by a scale when they go from the waiting room into the exam room, when most of the time the clinical issue has nothing to do with their weight? It's not a relevant clinical variable. Why must they sit in an exam room after having sat in the waiting room? And so all of these things got changed. In a little clinic that he started in San Francisco, he enlisted a lot of technologists to develop some of the tools that would allow people to schedule on their terms. This was not an easy lift early on. If you have 20 providers and you had to get all their schedules and make them available and make them accurate so that I could sit in my living room and figure out who I was going to see based on when I was available. It was not easy, but he did it. And people were seeing same day, next day, 97% of the time, people were seeing within 3 minutes of their appointment. And they passed the scale and they were greeted in the exam room by the treating provider who walked them back, started to develop rapport while they were walking, used their time face-to-face with AI in the background, transcribing all of the dialogue so they weren't treating the chart. The doctors weren't working at night in their jammies doing notes. Bottom line, all of this created a value proposition where people would pay to just have the experience. Still had to rely on their insurance for the actual cost of care, but to access it, they were willing to pay $39 just to be a member of the club that allowed them to use this app and to have this designed experience. And I'll end there because I know it's been a long tirade on my part, but all of that led to the fact that they were a great business that had a membership model on top of a fee for service that attracted Amazon. Thus, Amazon bolts it on to their membership service called Prime.
And I love that you reminded me of the BlackBerry because, yes, I'm dated enough to remember having a BlackBerry, and the big threat was, at any point in time, they could stop the use of the letter I and nobody could put the letter I, so everybody would be screwed. And so
Yeah.
thank you for that reminder. But you also talked about, your relationship and the transition from, One Medical and going from UCLA Health Center to Stanford. And you remind my listening audience of the essential nature of you're as good as your own personal brand, right? Referral and relationship, and that big red ocean of marketing, especially in full arch that we deal with, of just spend more on marketing to attract more patients that way. It's like, well, if you spend more time on your own personal brand and development in the blue ocean, you're going to bring more in. So thank you for that reminder. But I want to talk a little bit about here and really dive a little bit deeper into that patient experience you talk about. And what I focus on and we focus on, my entire team at GNA Consult, which is the patient experience, but even more so, which is difficult to identify and teach, which is that emotional connection with patients. Because that's what you were talking about. Everybody loves to talk about the first thing that you do, especially in big cases, is the greet and build rapport. But you talked about it in a way that was just so poignant, which is to remove that somebody comes into the waiting room, we call it a reception area, right? Because words matter. And the actually the physician that's going to see the patient actually greets the patient. And the rapport is being built as they're walking back into the area that they're going to receive the treatment. That piece of that walking and talking, there is also something about that movement aspect, right? The kinesthetic movement while the discussion's happening. So there's just all these little pieces. So talk to me a little bit about, because I know that you write about this, you speak about this, about the impact and how it's underestimated about the emotional connection and how that really plays out. So could
Well,
you
let
share
me
on that a
tie
little bit?
in the components you had about brand and the components that you had about emotion. So I think first we have to decide, what do we want people to feel every time they interact with us at this clinic? I don't care where you worked last week. What do we want every human being who steps into our world, whether that's online, on the phone, or in the reception area, to experience? And so once we define that, then we have to train people to it. We have to role play a lot of how do you make that happen in various circumstances? Because unlike the manufacturing side, those who listen to the manufacturing side, you get raw material that's consistent coming in the door, you impose processes, and you expect a defect of 0.001 by the end. Well, when we're talking about human manufacturing, they come in very varied raw material. There isn't consistency on the raw material. We still try to apply processes that increase the probability of an outcome. What's the defined outcome? It is that they walk out of there not only with a great clinical outcome, and they're raving about the way their smile looks, right? But they're also raving about how they were treated, that you cared for them with your skill set, but you cared about them in the emotional space that you created around them. So once you define what it is you want every single person to feel when they walk into your world, then it's a function of designing that into high value moments along the journey. Not every moment is equal, but the arrival moment is particularly memorable according to behavioral economists. So we want to make sure we nail that. We want to make sure we nail transitions. We want to remove pain points. But guess what? Pain points don't get you as many bonus points as you think. You should be always trying to make your business iteratively better. But what you should be doing is designing high value moments around arrival, transitions, departures, and celebrate your peak moments. Really put a bow on that. Put it in a bright, shiny box and say, look what we've achieved together. What a great choice you made. You are smart. You chose us, kind of thing. And so celebrating all of that, I think, is
Yeah,
part of the journey.
Yeah, we talk about celebrating all the time, right, with patients. And then we call it, what you just shared is, we term it every touch point of the patient journey, right? From the greeting to the phone, to make sure there's consistency, from the digital to the in-person, the first touch point in person, all the way through every touch point of that patient journey. So you're speaking my language with a few different words, but the concepts are right there. And I so appreciate that you're touching on that. And so, because of those referrals and customers wanting to spread the word, or clients or patients, whatever the case may be, I want to ask you this, because to go from that, we'll call it a transactional service, which in dental, it feels that way often, especially most of our clients have a huge GP side of their business, which is the traditional dentistry side of the business. And Full Arch is a piece of, it's an auxiliary part of this service. And they bring us in because they're either starting or they want to grow that side of their business. So that transactional nature of a team, and we're consistently working with teams that way, to transition from that transactional to more of, I think you term it more of a memorable or a lasting, or we call it a relational business, to really get those referrals and to build that brand up. Uh, Talk to me a little bit about what you've seen in your experiences working with teams, with organizational development psychology, with all of your experience, with all of your degrees, but more experiential of what you've
Yeah.
seen, that really make the move the needle and make the impact. I'd love to hear more about that from your perspective.
So at Zappos, when I worked with the late Tony Hsieh and wrote a book about them, we called it a PEC, a personal emotional connection. And the key word there was personal, though, alongside of your other used words of emotional, and connection is pretty important too. We're in a business of making connections, not making transactions. But suffice to say, my new book is called All Business is Personal, with real intention around it. Because while we may be transacting business, and this may be the 15th procedure today, it is extremely personal to the individual who is number 15. And their experience is really to them as tantamount as the first experience might have been for you earlier in the day, right? So I think, and it's even true in the B2B, if you're a manufacturer working with, dental communities, those personal relationships do matter. Now, obviously, product and pricing always are a competitive reality. And if you're in the bandwidth and you're in the game, the differentiator tends to be the degree to which you care. Because if you authentically care and take the time to understand what matters to the person you're serving, they will go the extra mile with you, and they won't allow a coupon to strike them to another competitor. And I think, and that is true in the dentistry world as well. I kept a dentist for the longest time in Colorado, despite moving to Florida, because I was completely loyal to the veneers that they did for me, right? And they were just an amazing, kind group. I knew there were competent dentists in my neighborhood, but I would travel for my regular appointments to Colorado. Now, thank God I had the financial bandwidth to do it, but the willingness to do it, the investment in doing it, I mean, that was probably as much as any dental care I received from them.
And you're talking about price versus value. And that's where you're talking about that stickiness, the fidelity, whether you're in clinic, whether you have a practice, or whether you're a manufacturer. And certainly I knew that, learned that, loved it, working with Neodent and building that brand up for Straumann Group. That was a huge part of what we did. So thank you for that reminder. And I'm sure that landed with my listening audience. Well, Joseph, is the part of the program. All my guests play a little something called What the Sleuth is Going On. 3
All right.
rapid fire questions. First thing that comes to mind, are you ready to play?
I'm doing my thinking position. Yes, go for it.
All right. Question number 1. What's the worst bad breath you've ever encountered?
Oh, probably my own, I think, after, spending a great deal of time in India. Yes.
I mean, somebody who's self-aware, I mean, they always say their own. And we did like the recap of the 100th episode of what answers came up, and their own, I think, was pretty close to the top. So thank you for that. All right, question number 2. If you could change one thing about your smile, you just told us about your veneers, what would it be?
Oh, it's my bottom teeth. Well, there's 2 things, actually. I have like a neurogenic thing, so I can't pull my mouth. I would love to have a even mouth, but my teeth are like tiny on the bottom, and they're getting worse as I get older. So, but I've always hidden the bottom. So I don't know. I got to think about that one. Next.
And I didn't even notice. And for those of you who are just listening online to the platform where you listen to this podcast, the Two Sleuth podcast, head over to the YouTube channel at about the 21st minute and just go and like do your little like looking in real close.
I'll
and
show my teeth.
I can't. Okay, now he's showing my teeth. All right.
Sure.
He's being vulnerable.
Yeah,
now he knows what the Two Sleuth podcast is all about. Well done, sir.
Now I'll get the stones thrown at my teeth. Go ahead. Yes.
Thank you for that. Question number 3. If you could go back and be the inventor of any dental product, and no, you can't choose your own, which one would you choose and why?
Oh, I do like my night guard. I think having ground teeth and waking up with headaches and jaw pain, whoever came up with the idea that you could put just a small apparatus in your mouth and get through the night, that's a good deal. Thank you. I wish it were me,
Same.
But whoever, thank you.
Same. I have a night guard, and I actually have a dental apparatus that brings my lower jaw forward to create more airspace, airway. And yeah, now I'm not like dental divorced because of it. My husband's very grateful that I have it. I snore a lot less. I breathe a lot better. I sleep a lot better. So
I don't know if I
right
snore. I'm too busy sleeping, but yeah,
the
other part I like.
Yeah. No, there you go. All right. Well, Joseph, in the last few minutes, I want to respect your time, my listening audience. Is there anything that I haven't asked you or that you really want to share with my listening audience today on the Two Sleuth podcast?
I do hope that if you are looking to elevate the experience that you deliver, that you'd reach out. We have plenty of free resources. It's not like I need to sell you anything. There's plenty of podcasts, things that I do, blogs, all that are just free. Go and check those out. If you find interest in a book, that's great. If not, stop by my website and let's chat.
Awesome. And what is that website? I was just going to ask you that as a final question.
I'll be doggone if I didn't leave that out there, didn't I? JosephMichelli.com. So if you got my first and last name in the show notes, you've got me, babe. Oh, no,
perfect. And we will make sure we get that. And your latest book is All Business is Personal, if I heard that correct. Is that out and available? Or
it's out and available. It's in the world. It's
awesome.
The story of one medical in Amazon's purchase.
Perfect. Amazing. Thank you so much. My guest today has been Joseph Michelli, and I got that wrong in the opening, so I'll say that right. And that in the green room, we talked about our last names. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Two Sleuth podcast. Lots of great information. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
If you need help with converting lead calls into consultations, closing consults into more full arch cases, or creating a more strategic marketing message and branding for your practice or group, follow me for more tips or reach out to G&A Consult for a discovery call today.